"You don't belong here." That was the first thing Ryan said to Jake in 10 years. He hadn't even turned around to say it, just muttered it low, like a curse, as he stood over their father's casket. Jake froze halfway down the aisle, the echo of the words louder than the organ music still playing overhead. Eyes from the front row shifted toward him, some with surprise, others with judgment. He adjusted the cuff of his suit, trying not to show how hard that one sentence hit. But it did. It hit like all the years in between hadn't passed. He hadn't even sat down yet. The church smelled of old wood, dust, and flowers that had started to wilt under the April sun. Jake hadn't been home in over a decade, yet nothing had changed, except now his father was in a box at the front of the room. The stained glass windows painted colored light on the floor, as if trying to make the grief look holy. He stood near the back, not quite ready to sit, not sure if he even belonged. In front of him, clusters of mourners murmured and hugged. He spotted some old neighbors, a few gray-haired uncles he barely remembered, and near the front, Ryan, his younger brother, head down, hands clenched into fists, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. Jake spotted the tension in Ryan's shoulders even from where he stood. Then Ryan finally turned. Their eyes met. Ryan didn't nod, didn't blink, just turned away again. So that's how it was going to be. After the service, Jake waited outside. He couldn't bring himself to approach the casket, not with all those eyes on him. He leaned against the iron gate, watching the wind ripple through the cemetery grass. The sky was blue, sharp, too cheerful. "You actually showed up," came Ryan's voice, low and flat behind him. Jake turned slowly. "It's good to see you too." Ryan crossed his arms, his black jacket too tight in the shoulders. "Didn't think you'd make time for the funeral of the man you left behind." "I didn't know if I should come," Jake admitted. Ryan's laugh was dry and humorless. "That's rich." Jake looked away, jaw tightening. "I figured you'd be angry." "Angry?" Ryan stepped closer, eyes burning now. Number angry was 6 years ago when Dad had a stroke and I had to drive him to every damn appointment. Angry was 4 years ago when I begged you to come home for his birthday and you texted, "Maybe next year." Now? I'm past angry. Jake exhaled slowly. "I had my reasons." "Yeah?" Ryan's voice cracked, brittle like ice. "Let me guess. You had to find yourself. Or were you too busy collecting job titles and air miles?" Jake stiffened. "I left because I had to save myself, Rye." "From what?" Ryan shot back. "From us." Jake didn't answer. The silence stretched. Ryan broke it. "Dad never forgave you." Jake flinched like he'd been slapped. "Thought you should know," Ryan added. "He stopped asking about you a few years in. Just shook his head every time your name came up. Like he was embarrassed you were his." Jake's voice was quiet. "He made it pretty clear who he was proud of." Ryan stared at him. "Yeah. Well, being the one who stayed doesn't mean I won anything. I thought you wanted to take care of him." "I had to take care of him." Ryan's voice rose, then dropped again, bitter and worn. "You got to leave. I got stuck. I missed college parties, job offers, everything, because someone had to stay. You chased freedom while I chased prescriptions and disability paperwork." Jake tried to meet his eyes. "You think I had it easy?" Ryan shook his head. "I think you had a choice. I didn't." Something twisted in Jake's gut. "Do you know what it was like being the spare son?" Ryan blinked. "Yeah," Jake said, stepping closer. "He didn't look at me like he looked at you. I was just the one who screwed up less, the one who didn't ask for anything. He loved you more, Rye. You were his." Ryan stared, stunned into silence. "At least you got to leave," he whispered after a long pause. "I had to stay and earn love that was never coming." The words settled between them like ash. They stood there, two grown men, both sons of the same man, both grieving things that went far deeper than a death. Jake finally said, "I came back to bury a man, but I think I'm here to fix a brother." Ryan didn't respond, not right away. He looked off at the parking lot, jaw tight. Then, without a word, he turned and sat down on the church steps. Jake hesitated, then sat beside him. They didn't speak, but they sat, and for the first time in years, they didn't feel quite so far apart. The silence after the conversation felt heavy, like the air had thickened around them. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it wasn't hostility either. It was something new, something fragile. Jake found himself standing in the doorway of his father's house for the first time in years, the familiar smell of dust and old wood surrounding him. The lock had rusted a little. He turned the key, the door groaning open like it resented him. like even the house remembered he had left. Inside, nothing had changed. The old plaid armchair still sat in its spot by the window, its cushions sagging in the middle. The mantel still held the faded photo of their family vacation to Yosemite. Jake, 9 years old, missing his 2 front teeth, and Ryan clinging to their father's leg with a shy smile. Their father had looked younger then, stronger, more solid. Jake stepped inside, the floor creaking under his weight like a warning. The house didn't smell bad exactly, just old, lived in. The ghost of coffee still clung to the kitchen, and somewhere in the air, the faint tang of his father's aftershave lingered. He wandered the rooms slowly, touching the edges of his childhood with tentative fingers. In his old bedroom, the wallpaper was still peeling in the corner. The closet still held some of his childhood things, an old baseball glove, a box of yellowing comic books, a cracked photo frame with a picture of him and Ryan as kids, grinning on their bikes. He hadn't realized how much he missed this place, even though it held so much pain. Downstairs, Ryan moved like a shadow, quiet, methodical, carrying boxes to the front hallway, sorting through documents, avoiding Jake's eyes. They barely spoke. Words felt like too much, too soon. Instead, they worked in tandem, their movements forming a rhythm. Open, sort, stack, toss. Jake tried not to read into it, but every time Ryan let a box linger between them for a beat too long, or didn't snap when Jake accidentally knocked something over, he wondered, is this grace or just exhaustion? Later that night, Jake sat on the edge of his childhood bed, staring out the window. The same oak tree still leaned slightly over the fence in the backyard. He used to climb it, fall from it, cry under it. Ryan sat on the floor of their father's bedroom, the light from a crooked lamp casting long shadows on the wall. He had opened a drawer and found the postcard. It had been stuffed between old tax forms and a manual for a toaster they no longer owned. He turned it over in his hand. The front was sun-bleached, an image of the Golden Gate Bridge, one of those tacky tourist cards with a smiling cartoon sun in the corner. The handwriting on the back was familiar. San Francisco's cold this time of year, but I thought of you. Hope you're doing okay. Jake. That was it. No long apology, no dramatic overture, just a small offering, a pebble tossed into a chasm. He had never read it until now. Ryan leaned his head back against the bed and shut his eyes. He had hated Jake for leaving, not just because he had to stay, but because Jake made it look easy. He had always carried himself like someone who didn't need anyone, and Ryan, for all his effort, had never learned how to do that. Staying had cost him everything. His 20s, his independence, his ability to plan a future beyond doctors and pills and late-night ER visits. Now that Dad was gone, there was no more obligation to bind him, but there was no blueprint either. And standing in the rubble of a life built around sacrifice, he wasn't sure who he was without it. The next morning, they returned to sorting. "You gonna take the vinyls?" Ryan asked finally, thumbing through the dusty collection by the TV stand. Jake blinked. It was the first non-sarcastic sentence Ryan had spoken to him since the funeral. "I don't have a player. Still into Springsteen." Jake smiled faintly. "Always." Ryan pulled out Born to Run and set it on the table. "Take it anyway. I'm keeping the Fleetwood Mac." Jake opened his mouth, but the moment didn't need a comment. He nodded. They kept working. At one point, Ryan found an old shoebox with receipts, family photos, and a cassette tape labeled simply, Summer 1993. He stared at it for a long moment, then placed it gently on the table beside Jake without saying a word. Jake looked at it, then at Ryan. He wanted to say something, thank you, maybe, but didn't. He just put his hand over the cassette like it was fragile. By the end of the day, the house looked thinner, like something had been pulled from its bones. Most of the furniture was marked for donation. The photographs were packed. The echoes of footsteps were louder now. Jake stood in the front hallway holding his jacket in one hand, staring at the door. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do next." Ryan leaned against the banister. "Neither do I." A pause. Jake turned. "I was thinking of staying in town a little longer." Ryan didn't look at him, but he nodded. "Suit yourself." Then, without another word, he pulled a set of keys from his pocket and left them on the table by the door. No explanation, no demand, just the keys. Then he left. Jake stared at the door long after it closed. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. Maybe for now, that was enough. The house had grown quieter with every passing day. It wasn't just the absence of their father's voice. It was the missing hum of routine, the silence where footsteps used to echo, the long pauses in conversation that neither Jake nor Ryan filled. Jake stayed longer than he'd planned. He told himself it was to help with the house, but the truth was messier. He didn't know what he was waiting for. Forgiveness? Closure? A reason to finally leave again? Instead, each day passed with quiet work and long silences, and he stayed. Most nights he slept in his old room. It felt like sleeping in a photograph, familiar but faded. Some nights he'd lie awake and hear Ryan moving around downstairs, the low creak of floorboards, the faint sound of the fridge opening, closing, silence again. Neither of them slept well. On the fifth night, Jake came downstairs to find the kitchen lights still on. Ryan sat at the table, a beer in front of him, shoulders hunched. There was a box open beside him, a mess of old tools and screwdrivers inside. Jake hesitated in the doorway. Ryan didn't look up. "There's another one in the fridge if you want." Jake got it, cracked it open, and sat across from him. For a few minutes, they drank in silence. Then Ryan asked, "You remember the summer Dad made us build that shed?" Jake gave a short laugh. "You mean the summer he made you build it while I handed him the wrong nails?" Ryan smiled, just slightly. "You were useless. I was 11, Jake protested. "You were always bad at pretending to be interested in what he cared about." Jake shrugged. "He never really gave me a reason to pretend." Ryan leaned back in his chair. "He just expected you to be him." Jake looked at him, eyebrows raised. "You think that's what he wanted?" "Yeah," Ryan said. "But when you weren't, he didn't know what to do with you." There was a silence, long and thoughtful. Jake said, "You know, I always thought he loved you more." Ryan didn't answer right away. He picked at the label on his bottle. "I think he just needed me more," he said finally. Jake leaned forward. "And that's not the same thing." "No," Ryan admitted. "It's not." The words hung in the air, heavy, true. They drank. Jake looked over at the box of tools. "What's all that?" "Dad's old set. Thought I'd go through it. Keep a few things." Jake reached in and pulled out a worn, wooden-handled screwdriver, the metal dark with age. "He used to fix everything himself, even when it didn't need fixing," Ryan said. "He just needed to have a purpose." Jake nodded slowly. "He ever say he was proud of you?" Ryan didn't answer. He looked away, eyes distant. "No," he said quietly. "Not really." Jake swallowed. "Me neither." Another silence. "I used to think if I did enough, stayed long enough, he'd say it," Ryan said. "Just once. You did good, son. Something. Anything." Jake looked down at his bottle. "I stopped expecting it." Ryan met his eyes. "I never did." That's the difference. They sat there in the dim kitchen, two grown men still carrying the ghosts of boys who just wanted their father to see them. Jake reached into the box again and pulled out a crumpled receipt, something handwritten on the back. "What's this?" Ryan took it, unfolded it, and frowned. It was a note, his father's handwriting. "Ryan, don't forget to call the plumber." "Jake, remember to check your oil before you drive back." Jake stared at it. "He wrote me a note." Ryan didn't say anything. The walls were bare now. The house felt more like a shell than a home. Echoes instead of voices, dust instead of presence. Ryan was in the living room, boxing the last of their father's books. Jake stood in the hallway, holding a faded family photo he found wedged behind a drawer. It was crooked, bent at the edges, their dad in the middle. Ryan on one side, maybe 12, Jake on the other, barely smiling. He didn't remember the photo being taken. "You keeping that?" Ryan asked from across the room without looking up. Jake hesitated. "No idea." Ryan snorted. "Figures. You never stayed long enough to hold on to anything." Jake's jaw tensed. "You want to do this now?" "Yeah," Ryan said, standing. "I think now is perfect." Jake stepped into the room. "Okay, say it. Get it out." Ryan tossed tape into a box. "You don't get to play the victim, Jake. You ran the hell away while I stayed behind and scraped Dad off the floor. You showed up now like it's your goddamn redemption arc, but you never called. Not once when he got sick. Not even when I asked." "I didn't know how to help," Jake snapped. "No, you didn't want to." Jake took a step closer. "I was drowning too. You think I left because I was happy? I left because I was suffocating in a house that only saw me as a disappointment." Ryan's face twisted. "Cry me a river. You think you were the only one who felt invisible?" Jake shook his head. "You don't get it. You were the one he looked at like he mattered. Me? I was the accident he didn't know what to do with." "You chose to leave," Ryan said coldly. "I didn't get that luxury." "No," Jake shot back. "You chose to stay. You could have left, Ryan. You just didn't." Ryan's voice rose, bitter and shaking, because I thought if I stayed long enough, if I did everything right, he'd finally say it, that I was enough, that I was worth something. Jake's voice dropped to almost a whisper. And did he? Ryan didn't answer. Jake sighed, ran a hand through his hair. We were both chasing someone who never knew how to love us. Yeah, well, Ryan muttered. At least I had the guts to face him. Jake looked at him hard, and I had to live with never saying goodbye. That stopped Ryan for a moment. He looked down, swallowed, silence. Then Jake pulled a folded envelope from his coat. He left me a letter. Found it yesterday. Ryan's face hardened. Of course he did. Jake opened it and read aloud. Jake, I never knew how to say the right things. I thought staying quiet would keep me from hurting you. But I see now it only made it worse. I didn't know how to love a son who didn't remind me of myself. That was my failure, not yours. Ryan needed me, but you deserved me too. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Dad. Ryan turned away. Jake's voice softened. He admitted it, Rye. Everything we needed to hear. Just 20 years too late. Ryan rubbed his face. You think that fixes it? No, Jake said. But it's something. Ryan nodded slowly. Too little. Too late. Yeah, Jake said quietly. That's kind of our family motto. Ryan walked to the table and picked up the cassette tape. Summer 1993. He stared at it. Jake stepped toward the door. I'm catching a flight in the morning. Ryan didn't look at him. Of course you are. Jake lingered. I know you don't forgive me, he said. Ryan finally looked at him. I don't. Jake nodded. I don't forgive me either. The words hung there, bitter and raw. I hope you figure out what to do with all this, Jake added, gesturing to the house. The memories, the silence between them. I really do. Ryan watched him walk to the door. Jake paused, hand on the knob. If you ever want to yell at me again, you've got my number now. A small breath, almost a laugh, escaped Ryan. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cruel either. Jake left. Ryan stood alone in the room. The house creaked. Rain tapped the windows. He stared down at the cassette in his hand. He didn't play it. Not yet, but he didn't throw it away. 6 months later, the letter sat in a drawer. The cassette tape, too. Ryan hadn't listened to it. Not yet. Some days he'd take it out, hold it in his hand, then put it right back. Like grief, too heavy to carry, too familiar to throw away. The house had been sold 3 months ago. A young couple bought it. She was pregnant. They were excited about the backyard. Ryan had said nothing about the ghost. He lived 2 towns over now. Smaller place, cheaper rent, quieter nights. He worked at a hardware store, part-time. Didn't talk much to co-workers, but he didn't dread mornings the way he used to. One Sunday, a postcard arrived. San Francisco skyline. The Golden Gate Bridge under fog. No message. Just, J. Ryan left it on the fridge. He didn't write back. Didn't throw it away either. A week later, he was cleaning out a box he hadn't opened since the move. Found a photograph tucked between 2 books. Him and Jake, maybe 7 and 9, sitting on the hood of their dad's old truck, eating popsicles. Both laughing, mouths stained blue and red. Ryan stared at it for a long time. That night, he played the tape. The sound was crackly at first. Then came the voices, tiny, high-pitched versions of themselves, yelling about sprinkler wars, bike races, and some dumb joke Jake had made that had them both in stitches. Then their father's voice. Say bye to the camera, boys. Ryan pressed pause. He sat in the dark for a long time, the tape still warm in the player, the silence louder than anything. Finally, he whispered. Not to the tape, not to Jake, not even to himself, just to the room. Hey. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel like no one was listening.